Well, good morning. Thank you so much, Mihal. It's so great to be here. Thank you to Bank of America and the corporate sponsors for putting on these events. And Jim, thank you so much for your leadership. You and your team do such an outstanding job. You've been such a great partner to our office on so many fronts, and I really appreciate it. And the ride over here this morning reminded me of your comments yesterday. And we do have a crisis in transportation when it comes to this state, and it is an issue that affects our business, it affects our economy, it affects people from all walks of life, and we need to act with urgency. Obviously, the business community has been particularly vocal about this. We know how it messes up and impacts productivity and GDP, and it just is it's just ridiculous what's happening, okay? And we should not have this in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We need to come together now and figure out a plan. It was troubling yesterday. I had employees, who couldn't get to work. We all have that scenario, right? But, then to see sort of, the prices jack up with Uber and Lyft and the like, this just can't continue. And no matter where you are in the state, but particularly in the greater Boston area, no matter if you're going by car or bus or train, your travel is impeded, you cannot count on it, and I just appreciate the comments. That's my editorial comment for the morning. I made a few others. Okay, so I drove by the garden this morning on the ride in from Charlestown. They're already starting to come. I see the black and gold sweaters piling into Charlestown at, 8 o'clock in the morning. So people should be pretty ripe by 5 o'clock or so. When I come home, I can't even imagine. But it's awesome. We've got Game 7 in Boston, so that's great. And Big Poppy seems to be coming out of harm's way right now. That was obviously concerning, but thank you for bearing with me, as if only to serve as a distraction as you count the hours till the puck drops. Look, I look forward to a conversation, more importantly, your comments. I was with many of my AG colleagues last week at a meeting, and I was bragging about the relationship that we have and actually highlighting some of the innovative partnerships that we have. And it was to an audience full of corporate citizens from all across the country, businesses from all across the country. And I wanted them to hear about ways to think about working with their own AG's offices. And I think we were able to do that and highlight some of the work that we've done together and with some of your members. And I just really appreciate that. And a lot of people came up to me afterwards and said, hey, we'd like to take that on. I'm not going to come with a particular policy issue. Sometimes I've come, right? Remember I dropped the human trafficking bomb on you a few years ago. You probably weren't expecting that. I talked about vaping. Obviously, we spent time on the opioid crisis. But I want to talk to you about something else this morning. We've been working as an office across a lot of fronts these last few years. And one thing that has become clear to me is that in this time, government, there are a couple things going on. Government isn't leading the way it should. I think here in Massachusetts, we've done a pretty good job. But you look across the country, government is not leading the way it should. And where government is trying to lead and trying to take action, it's not as effective as it could be. And my takeaway is that we can't go this alone. And I just wanted to share some thoughts with you, really present this as an opportunity with that recognition. I hope this doesn't come off as some sort of pedantic lecture. That's not what I'm aiming for, guys. I'm really just trying to speak to what I see as an opportunity in this time. In a time that is unique in our country, a time of consequence, a time of concern, and a time, I think, of necessary action on the part of all of us, from business, academia, the NGO community, and government. And I've always said from the beginning that for us to solve the most complex and seemingly intractable problems and to move us forward to the kind of future that we should have as a state, as a nation, it's about all of us working together. The second point I want to make is that I wanted to point out a statistic, that a recent survey, and I actually hadn't seen this before. Some of it doesn't surprise me, but one thing did surprise me. There was a recent survey about trust in our institutions. Less than half reported they trusted social media, journalists, or government. That did not surprise me. I won't tell you how much less than half that survey was. But here's the thing, 3 in 4 Americans trust their employer. That means the business community has a huge voice and a huge opportunity. Now, at the Greater Boston Chamber, you have always embraced that role, and you've modeled corporate citizenship to your peers. You understand fundamentally that being, being an employer in this climate means ensuring that your employees live and work in healthy and sustainable communities. Because you understand that our economies thrive when our communities thrive. Nationally, the business community has often led the way on many of our most important fights. Think about the 80s and the fight to end apartheid in South Africa. It was IBM and GE that stepped forward, making nationwide news by pulling out of that country. Think about the 1990s when Disney set a new standard by offering domestic partner benefits to the LGBT employees. And a few years ago, after North Carolina passed their discriminatory HB2 law, it was Bank of America who teamed up with the Human Rights Campaign to push for and secure a repeal. Thanks in large part to this chamber, that's also been true in Massachusetts. So this year marks the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, the 15th anniversary of the Goodrich decision in marriage equality in our state. And I think about your role, the role of the chamber and the business community in helping to make that progress possible. You stepped forward to say that discrimination against employees is not just a violation of their civil rights, it's bad for business. You made the case for workplace equality in our challenge to the Defense of Marriage Act. We had a federal law that only recognized the marriages of certain couples in the state, but not same-sex couples. And for your married same-sex couples employees, this meant they didn't get the benefit of retirement and tax and savings offerings, benefits, available to other married couples. That was wrong, and it actually impacted your work and your workplace. It was also against your corporate ethos. So when we were putting together our state's challenge on the case, I knew that we needed more than just compelling legal arguments. We needed you and your voices. And that's why nearly 300 businesses filed an amicus brief in the U.S. Supreme Court in that case, including many of you represented here and some of our biggest and best known employers like State Street, Mass Mutual, Eastern Bank, the list goes on. We turned to you again when transgender rights were being secured in our #EveryoneWelcome campaign. And last fall, on the Yes on 3 campaign, where so many businesses came forward with videos and statements in support of civil rights. And of course, we saw the important role of the business community when it came to securing universal health care in this state, and more recently, in fighting the travel ban. You know, in the travel ban case, I knew that we had strong constitutional arguments. I knew that AGs from around the country would be stepping forward, joining with immigrant advocacy groups to fight that discriminatory ban. But I happened to land in Logan Airport that Saturday afternoon when that ban was going into effect. And over the course of that evening and the ensuing days, I took so many calls from CEOs of our major tech companies, life sciences companies, our colleges and universities, our research institutions and hospitals, all concerned about the impact of that kind of policy. And days later, when we filed in court, there were 50 declarations from Massachusetts institutions and businesses in support of our challenge. Together, we made the case that the travel ban undermined our knowledge economy here in Massachusetts, that our companies and our economy depended upon recruiting the best talent from around the world. And as much as anything, that shaped public opinion and convinced people that that ban needed to fail. And today, I'm asking for your voice again. I'm going to start with reproductive rights. This isn't just about Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi or Iowa. Think about Missouri, where there's only one remaining provider of abortion services in the state, and it was nearly forced to close last month. More than 11 million women in America now live more than an hour from the nearest abortion provider, and that number increases every day. Roe v. Wade is at its greatest risk since that decision was handed down more than 45 years ago. This state and this country need to hear from you. They need to hear from you right now. And here's why. Yes, this is a matter of privacy, this is a matter of respect for a woman's right to make a healthcare decision for herself. Yes, it's a civil rights issue, but it's also an economic issue. Because I know you all understand this. Women are more than half the population, half the workforce. Women receive the majority of college degrees and graduate degrees in this country. We are employers, employees, consumers, and caretakers. We are your sisters and daughters and mothers, granddaughters, nieces, and cousins. Since Roe, women entering the workforce have added more than $3 trillion to our economy. Make no mistake, these new laws are about prohibiting women from making decisions about their own bodies, their own families, and their own lives. But it also affects a woman's ability to go to school, stay in school, join the workforce, stay in the workforce. And I think that's why you saw this week in the New York Times, 180 CEOs from around the country step forward and say it's time to stand up for reproductive rights. I saw some Massachusetts companies listed in that statement. And I really encourage each and every one of your businesses and organizations to take a look at this. It matters. And your voice matters. We need to hear from all of you. And we need to make the case that women's equality and economic independence are not, should not ever be up for debate in this state and this country at any time going forward. I ask for your support on this issue. You know, yesterday I spoke at a graduation. It was an all-girls school. And it was really something to see these wonderful young women walk to receive their diplomas. And I was thinking about the world they're about to enter. These are young women with all sorts of talent and ability and aspirations. But I was also thinking about the work we still have to do. And that's why I applaud you, and I ask that you continue to work on recruitment and retention to grow inclusivity and diversity within your workforce. Recruit women on boards, recruit women into the C-suites, and yes, even in politics. Some of these policies, frankly, wouldn't come to be if there were more women around the table making laws, making regulations, making policies. The other thing I want to say is this. Facts and science. I can't think of a state where facts and science and research mean more as an economic imperative. And I ask for your continued support in fighting efforts to defund or limit funding for the NIH. I know many of you looking out in this room depend on the incubation and the work within NIH to occur. And every time the Trump administration takes a bite out of facts and science, cuts funding, it hurts our economy here. Here's where we have a real opportunity in Massachusetts. It's clean energy. I was just talking to some folks in the back about this. We need to continue to hear from you on clean energy and addressing climate change. Right now, as we speak, whole communities in Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas are underwater from catastrophic flooding. Tens of thousands forced from their homes. Up to half of the corn and soybean crop in this country might be wiped out. It's time to be clear about exactly what is happening, why coastal communities in Massachusetts are having to spend so much money, billions, trying to prepare for rising sea levels. If you want it real close to home, Dave Epstein wrote a great piece in the Globe this morning tying pollen to the increase in carbon dioxide, which is directly related to climate change. It's something I know any number of us are having to deal with right now in terms of allergies, right? Every time you sneeze, think about climate change. So we need to hear from you. This is a climate crisis, because you understand that this is not only an existential threat for our planet and our state, but combating climate change is big business as well as good policy. Massachusetts alone has 100,000 clean energy jobs, double the number of coal jobs in the entire United States of America. This represents an $11 billion industry right here in the Commonwealth. The solar and wind industries are creating jobs 12 times faster than the rest of the economy. 12 times faster. And there are now more Americans working in solar energy than oil and natural gas extraction. Last year, for the first time ever, we had enough rooftop solar in place that on one day, our electric needs were lower in the middle of the day than they were at night. And that also resulted in the drop of wholesale prices from 6 or 7 cents an hour to 0. Just think about the implications for your bottom line. Then there's the state's recent issuance of the RFP for offshore wind. Our goal is to be the national leader in Atlantic offshore wind, including through our ports on the South Coast. We need to double down on clean energy jobs, economic development, and renewable energy for our state. What we don't need is more pseudoscience from an administration that claims climate change is a hoax. We don't need to open up 90% of our Atlantic coastal waters to oil drilling. And we definitely don't need a Deepwater Horizon off Buzzards Bay. We need your voices here. We need you to continue to speak up and speak out. And think about it when you're purchasing vehicles or moving to new offices. Next, on immigration rights. You were with us, as I said, on the travel ban. Now we need your voice on DACA and Dreamers, on TPS, and on asylum seekers. Earlier this year, I went down to the border with some of my colleagues from other states. And what I saw was so sad and horrifying. Families, young children, mothers applying for asylum, sleeping in tents and on sidewalks in Tijuana. Children stranded hundreds of miles from relatives. This is not just about our country, but about our country and our state's relationship with places like Mexico and Central and South America. Did you know that this supply chain that runs through Central and South America and Mexico accounts for $6 billion and 120,000 jobs alone in Massachusetts? $6 billion and 120,000 jobs in Massachusetts alone. So this is about a cruel anti-immigrant policy, as well as our country's failure to address the economic and geopolitical situation in Central and South America. But it's also about the economics of what's happening on the ground here in Massachusetts. This is a state where 1 in 5 workers, 1 in 5, born outside of this country. And in Boston, it's 1 in 3. There are 12,000 TPS holders in Massachusetts. These are folks with temporary protected status that the Trump administration tried to take away. We had to sue to block that. But there are 12,000 of them in Massachusetts from El Salvador and Haiti and other countries. 8,000 dreamers for whom this is the only country they've ever called home. Because of the stability and security of these programs, they can go to school, serve in our military, start businesses, pay mortgages, buy homes, pay taxes here. All of this threatened to be taken away. They represent hundreds of millions of dollars in spending power. Or take our Social Security system. I know we have some financial services folks in the room this morning. Think about what's happening there. Think about what dire shape our Social Security system is in as more Americans retire and live longer after retirement. Immigrants pay billions in payroll taxes into that system. Congress and the President are debating these programs right now, and they need to hear from you. They need to hear from people like Liam McClellan. Liam's the CEO of Kettle Cuisine, a company operating in Lynn. And they're a national soup company, by the way. You may or may not have heard of them, but they're one of Lynn's biggest employers. Liam alone has 25 employees working in the Lynn facility with TPS status. Many of them have been employees there for over 20 years and are now managers and supervisors. In Liam's words, losing these employees would be devastating. Many of you have employees or family of employees who are recipients of DACA and TPS status. We need you to speak up on their behalf. And finally, we need your help to ensure our city, our state, are as welcoming, diverse, and as inclusive as possible. It is time for us to tackle systemic racism. Systemic racism, in part, formulated, promulgated, made concrete by laws and policies and decisions made years ago, in part by the whole construct of how this country came to develop and grow. This stuff is real, and it plays out every single day. That's why the average wealth of an African American family in Boston is $8. You can't even buy 2 coffees at Starbucks with $8. But that's where we are. So we have work to do. And that involves coming together to address everything from housing and transportation, education. All of these are important vectors on the lines of equity and whether or not we're going to allow disparities to exist and persist. They exist, whether we allow them to persist. So I ask for your continued help there. The good news is many of you have already shown the way and are leading on these efforts. And I just ask all of us to come together and double down. A few weeks ago, there was that incident at the MFA. I don't know what happened entirely, but I do know this. If any one child in our city feels that they have been racially profiled, that's a problem. It actually, in my view, doesn't really matter what transpired. The fact that that one child felt that way is what should matter to all of us. And that's what I want us to take up and work on. What can we do to make sure that everyone feels like they can grow up in a world and a community where they have every opportunity to be their very best selves? Again, I think it's the right thing to do, not just as a moral imperative, but also as an economic decision. We know study after study has shown that diverse companies see better returns, better financial returns, and make smarter decisions. And that's why I know so many of our companies and brands here represented in this room have led the way on this issue. And I ask you to continue your efforts. And speaking of which, I think about with the Bruins on everyone's mind today. Did you know about Willie O'Ree? He was the first black player in the NHL, and who brought him here? The Boston Bruins back in 1958. So we've got a legacy to continue. I also think about entities like Partners who have been hosting yearly diversity summits, creating diversity mentoring programs. I was just with the CEO of HubSpot the other night, and anytime they hire for a director level position, they require their hiring team to interview at least one diverse candidate. Look, I'm going to close now by just returning to where I started. I have so much faith in the smarts and the talents and the aspirations of the companies and the individuals who run them represented in this room. I think that we are on the precipice of some really serious decisions in terms of direction in this country. And I also believe that Massachusetts has had a unique role since our founding in determining and charting the course for our country's future. And I just think that it is such a worthy investment for us to be convening, for us to be talking, and for us to be working together on some of these issues. And I appreciate your time this morning and hearing me out. Again, I recognize the efforts that so many of you have already made on some of the issues that I touched upon. But I also know, having been at this for 5 years, that government alone isn't going to get this done. And in fact, government sometimes gets in the way. And that's why I ask for your support. I ask for you to continue to lift your voice and speak out. And I think it will make for healthier families, healthier communities, and yes, healthier economies. Thanks so much.